you need some kicking help heading into Week 15 and the last 2 weeks of fantasy football. The first guy to get's Dustin Hopkins of the Washington football team. Hopkins is a guy that's been on the radar, and he was on this list last week as well in another double-digit fantasy game for Hopkins with 12 fantasy points. He had a 23-yarder, a 34-yarder, and a 53-yarder and 2 extra points versus San Francisco. And now Hopkins, he's got double-digit fantasy games now in his last 6 weeks. So this guy, he's a must-get. He's got another decent matchup versus Seattle Seahawks coming up here in Week 15. And the Seahawks, they're bend but don't break defense. And yesterday, the Jets had 4 attempts at field goals, but the Jets missed 3 field goals. And in this game, I could see Hopkins having 3 or 4 attempts, especially if Dwayne Haskins is behind center. And Washington, they're going to play it conservative. So Hopkins, he's available in 98% of fantasy leagues. And if you need a kicker, he's the first guy to get. The second one is Greg Zuerlein of the Dallas Cowboys. Zuerlein, he missed 3 field goals versus the Baltimore Ravens in Week 13. Week 13, but in Week 14, he bounced back with a good game versus the Cincinnati Bengals, hitting all his field goals. He hit a 23-yarder, a 37-yarder, and a 58-yarder was Greg the Leg with 3 extra points. Dallas, they played well. Zuerlein, he hit his field goals, like I said, this week. He's available in 62% of leagues, but I feel like Zuerlein's an every week kicker. Every other week, he's going to do good, and this week, he did good. He had a good game, and he's got a good matchup versus San Francisco 49ers in a home game here in Week 15, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers. So Greg the Leg, I think he's a decent get this week. The third guy's Mike Nugent of the Arizona Cardinals. Nugent, he filled in for Zane Gonzalez, who missed this game versus the Giants. And Nugent, he didn't disappoint in this one with 14 fantasy points. He hit a 37-yarder, 36-yarder, 33-yarder, 31-yarder, and 2 extra points. He also missed a 43-yarder, but it's not a big deal. If Nugent stays the kicker, he's been pretty accurate, and this guy's a veteran who's been around now, is Nugent. 15 years, I believe, in the NFL. And this week, he's got a good matchup versus the Philadelphia Eagles, who give up the 7th most fantasy points to kickers. So Nugent, he's out there in 100% of leagues. He's in a good offense, and he's got a good matchup. So he's a good get this week. The 4th kicker is Cristiano Santos of the Chicago Bears. Santos, he's been pretty decent over the last few weeks, is Santos. And I like what he could do here this week for your fantasy teams, is Santos. He had 10 points versus the Chicago Bears in Week 14. 37-yarder, 33-yarder, and 4 extra points. They got a good matchup coming up versus the Minnesota Vikings that give up the 5th most fantasy points to kickers is Minnesota. So Santos, I think he can have double digits again. This game's going to be a pretty decent shootout, I believe, with the Bears and the Vikings in Week 15. And this is an indoor game, so you can't go wrong with a kicker kicking indoors. So he's the 4th guy, and he's also available in 99% of leagues. And the 5th and final kicker is Stephen Gostkowski, the Tennessee Titans. I've been down on Gostkowski now for the last few weeks and stuff, but he's been picking it up as late after the early season struggles, and he's on a team that gets a lot of opportunities and get field goal chances, and he had a good game in Week 14 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars with a 55-yarder and 4 extra points. He's available in 75% of fantasy leagues, and he's got a matchup versus the Detroit Lions in Week 15. On paper, they give up the 2nd least amount of fantasy points to kickers. But I think Gostkowski, he could find a way and have a good ball game in this one. So that's a few kickers I'm looking at on waivers here heading into Week 15.